Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for taking some time out of the beautiful weather to spend time with me. As always, really appreciate your time. Definitely some familiar faces, so good to see you again and some new ones as well. So my name is Elliot Laratonda. I'm a safety advisor for environmental health and safety here at Penn State. I'm also an affiliate faculty member, part of MATC, and teach MATC. I have to look at the course number now, 465, because it's brand new. It was recently accepted by Faculty Senate and part of Penn State curriculum now. So very excited about that. I've taught it a few times as a special topics course, but now it's available to the university community, MATC as a whole. So I will continue to shamelessly plug this. Please tell your friends. If it fits your schedule, that would be great. I know a lot of you have taken courses, if not this one, sub courses of that, and we've done some training together. But yeah, please tell your friends. It's really exciting. But I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here to talk about incident investigation and how it really is a piece of cake. No big deal, right? So the topic here, why did I choose this topic? Well, one, I get to choose and I like it, so sorry. But no, the real reason is because there is application to you, whether you go work in industry or maybe you're going to be working in a lab and doing research. Incident investigation is important, right? When incidents happen, we investigate to learn why they occurred. And so you're going to learn the perspective of a safety professional, what our goals are as part of incident investigation, and what role you can play so you can be better informed and maybe participate, again, whether it's in industry or in the lab, so you can be an active partner towards incident investigation. Okay? And I will explain the cake theme. There's a cake theme throughout. Maybe you're already eyeing up our door prizes here, so more explanation to come. First, let's define some things, and that is what we call an incident. Okay, it's kind of an umbrella term, but an incident is really any unplanned event, right? We didn't plan for it, we didn't mean for it to happen, but undesirable in nature. I mentioned it's an umbrella term, so what lives underneath the definition of incident is accident and near miss. So an accident is an unattended event that unfortunately results in some type of loss, injury, illness, maybe major property damage. A near miss is an incident that does not result in loss, but could have, right? With a slight shift in time or space or some minor variable could have resulted in, say, injury, illness, or serious property damage. So the nomenclature is not too important. We just use the word incident as the umbrella term. That's the safest. It might matter in like the corporate level of EHS where we're dealing with many, many types of events and have to categorize and track metrics. But for our intents and purposes, incident is a term that we're using. Okay. So let's talk about incident causation, the architecture. Like, why do incidents occur? Okay, there's three different levels or ways we can talk about this. First, starting with general levels, we start with what we call root causes. Root causes lead to what we call contributing causes or contributing factors of the incident. Those lead to the direct cause, which results in some outcome or effect. Let's phrase that a different way, right? The descriptions might be root causes or organizational deficiencies, organizational mechanisms or the lack of organizational mechanisms that then allow hazards to exist in the workplace. Those are contributing causes. Those contributing causes or hazards that exist in the workplace we can typically group into unsafe conditions and unsafe acts. Okay, more on all this to come. These hazards that exist in the workplace that are allowed to exist because of organizational mechanisms or frameworks, they lead to the direct cause, which would be really natures of events or exposures, whether they're chemical, biological, maybe radiological in nature. It's a nature of exposure. And then finally, those exposures result in bodily impact or harm or maybe environmental impact, okay? One last way to describe it, these different levels, is by example. Okay, so let's say there's an organization that maybe fails to put together a good electrical safety program. They don't provide people training, a means of risk assessment, a way to identify what personal protective equipment is needed. Okay, organizational gaps. This results in hazards to exist in the workplace. And our example is an employee that's, say, working from a ladder and has exposure to and eventually makes contact with an energized electrical circuit. Hazards. Then they become part of that energized circuit. They receive a shock, a type of exposure, and then consequently a fall off of the ladder, and also a nature of exposure. then that leads us to the outcome, the bodily impact of harm, right? Maybe it's superficial burns from the electrical shock, and then maybe, let's say, broken or bruised ribs from the fall to the lower level. Okay? It's the causation and architecture of these incidents or adverse events that we're really interested during investigation. Another way to look at this, and this framework's important, so deviating from the cake theme, I promise I'll come back, but one way to look at it or illustrate it is the idea of a flower or plant, right? And it comes from the start of all this, right, is the root cause, right? So we see our roots here. Root causes, remember, they're organizational deficiencies, lack of structure or mechanisms or programs in the workplace. These are the roots. This is where the problem grows from. And it's underground in this picture because they're typically latent and hidden, hard to see. Okay? I will interrupt myself to say I didn't create this image. I borrowed it from a colleague, Mark Linson-Bigler, but it's a good one. From root causes, the problem grows, right? And then we see what we might call superficial causes. Remember, we called them contributing factors. These are the hazards, the stem and leaves that you're seeing here, typically characterized as unsafe acts, behaviors, and unsafe conditions, physical, tangible things of the environment. These are the hazards that are allowed to exist from the root causes. And then we get to the top of our flower here, and that is the direct cause of injury. We have some different descriptions here, but really this is the nature of exposure. They cause adverse outcomes, effects, and impact. Okay? I thought that was a really good illustration to share with you. Back to the cake theme, okay? Every incident is a bit different, just like every cake recipe might be a little bit different. One recipe might call for this list of ingredients, another one, a different list of ingredients, but there's usually things that are in common, right? And for a cake, maybe it's flour, sugar, butter, I'm not the expert, whatever. There's consistent ingredients across those recipes, right? And the same thing with all the complicated and convoluted of things that line up to cause an accident. It's the same deal with incident causation, and that would be the three common ingredients: unsafe acts, unsafe conditions, and organizational deficiencies. Okay? And really, as a note I added there, the most common one of such, and that research tells us, is really unsafe acts and behaviors. And that's why one way to put it is, as a safety professional, we really find ourselves being a people professional. We have to understand human behavior, complex relationships, why people do the things they do, because that is the most common cause. But really not to blame. More on that later. That's really important. All right, another cake graphic. I hope you enjoy this and what AI can produce for me. Okay, so this is an adaptation of Heinrich's triangle, right, from research 100 years ago that showed the relationships of these types of events and some of the things that we talked about. Okay, don't worry about the exact numbers, and they're not really true 100 years later. But what does remain true is the general relationship or the difference in maybe orders of magnitude that separate the number of these types of events. Okay, so at the bottom of your cake or your triangle, you have the most common types of things, and that is these hazards: unsafe conditions, unsafe acts. Okay? For every about 1,000 hazards, you get about 100 what we call near misses. Remember, that's when a hazard nearly causes pain, suffering, impact, but it just missed, right? We call that a near miss. For every about 100 or so near misses, you have about 10 or more minor injuries. These are injuries where someone maybe receives first aid, or maybe even has to go to the hospital, get some evaluation, but doesn't miss significant time away from work. It doesn't alter their life in some meaningful way. And for every 10 or so of those, you have about one what we call major incident or injury. And that would be something where someone is, unfortunately, their life might be changed. They might miss multiple days from work, not able to work, provide for their family. Maybe it's an amputation. Maybe it's a serious health condition from which they never recover. Maybe they're partially or permanently disabled to some degree, or maybe in the even smaller subset of that, it's a fatality. So the thing is, of course, we're going to intervene when we identify hazards, the base of this cake, right? All of these events, yes, we should intervene. But our focus here are on when we have that unfortunate outcome, the incident, the top three layers of the cake, that's really where incident investigation occurs. Most organizations do a good job on the major or even minor injuries or illnesses, but not everyone investigates the near misses. But really, all of these types of events, all incidents, we can learn from. And we'll see that more when we do our exercise as a group. Okay, now we're transitioning to the how-to, You got the background painted for you, okay? So this is incident investigation basics, some philosophy. And the first philosophy I would lead with is that you always want to convey that well-being is number one. Sometimes us as professionals are working collaboratively with folks. We get caught up in the process, the investigation, wanting to do a good job for our organization, and we kind of forget to maybe ask, say, the victim or individual that was injured, say, hey, are you feeling okay? I'm sorry this happened to you. Are you recovered enough to talk about this? So that's really important. Don't forget, yes, this is a data-driven process, and hopefully you'll see that moving forward, but it's a people-first process. So that's important. The goals of incident investigation, it's of course to identify what happened, but it's about, more importantly, maybe to identify why it happened. And this is that incident causation theory that we're going to refer to in practice a bit. When we're doing incident investigation, we're trying to identify what happened and why it happened, but equally important, we're rolling out what didn't happen. And a lot of us are going to recall, criminology type TV shows, NCIS, or pick your acronym, where law enforcement, that's what they do, right? You can imagine investigation or interrogations where they're trying to roll out maybe suspects or causals, right? And that's true. We borrow from that a bit. We're trying to not only identify what happened, but along the way, roll out for sure what didn't happen. So that makes a lot of sense, hopefully. Our goal overall, why we do incident investigation, is to prevent similar incidents from happening again. Not only to prevent similar or exact circumstances from repeating, but also to prevent similar in nature, or maybe even, let's call them adjacent or proximate events. Sometimes we learn things along the way about other incidents that could happen because we're investigating this particular circumstance. And overall, the goal is to never find blame. That's not the goal. So I'm bookending this, right? Well-being number one. Also, we're not here to find blame. Maybe that's unlike the law enforcement example. We're not here to find a suspect, a person. It's different, right? We're in the workplace. The law says that, our organizations are responsible for providing a safe workplace to employees. So for that reason and others, our goal is to not find blame. It's almost never an individual's fault, right? Sure, unsafe acts and behaviors can contribute to an outcome, but we're not here to find blame. So that should be really clear as well. Okay, so how do we do it? So this outlines the basic steps of incident investigation, and we're going to go through each, and you guys are going to get to contribute and practice for a chance to win our delicious prize. Okay, so the basic steps, right? We're going to gather information, and we'll tell you how to do that. We're going to analyze the facts to see what else we need to know. We're going to determine those causes, and we'll give you some specific tools on how to do that. And then of course, we're going to take action for reoccurrence, to prevent reoccurrence. So how do we gather information? Some of you, this might look somewhat familiar. I've adapted it since we've last talked about it. So my advice for gathering information is to remember the 3 Ps, the 3 Ps of incident investigation. Just a trick to help you remember where to start. Okay? The first P being people. We're going to learn things from people. We're going to maybe interview, talk to, or get statements from the person or people affected. You might call them a victim in some circumstance. Maybe any supervisors in the area, the PI in the lab environment, whatever it may be. Okay? You're going to interview maybe other people that are adjacent or work in the same area. Maybe they were a witness and can learn from them as well. The other P is papers. Again, just a word to remember it, but we're going to gather maybe records, training records, equipment log records, maybe standard operating procedures, protocols, maintenance documents. What's the document we're going to collect if it involves chemical exposure? Safety data sheet. Yeah. Any and all papers that help us build this narrative and understand cause. And then finally, the last P is parameters. I used to just say photos here, but I learned it's kind of more than that, and I found a better word. Okay? So parameters being, we're going to record some stuff and learn some things about our physical world, and we might measure, we might take measurements, physical dimensions, measurements. We might take photos, that could be really helpful. We might look at equipment specifications, temperature, pressure, voltage, pH, whatever that may be. We might take readings, right? We might use instruments to take readings of ventilation, of air contaminants, airflow, air speed, air changes. And we can think of many more examples, but those are the 3 Ps. That'll help you gather information, right? People, paper, and parameters. Once we gathered information, we're going to analyze what we got. Okay. So this is really the what. What happened? What is that narrative? Honestly, this usually takes the place of, a paragraph or two written down that on this date, at this time, this is what happened. This is what I know. This is your opportunity to understand what the holes are, right? Where do you need more information? It's really important to stay kind of non-biased. And first of all, or to add to that, these two steps are kind of the easy part because you just get to be objective. You just collect the information and say what the facts are, right? You're taking that step back, being non-biased, objective. But I will say it helps for both sides to understand that sometimes all we have to go off of is secondhand information. It's not uncommon for incidents to happen behind closed doors, only to one or two people, whatever. At some point, all that you have to go on is what someone tells you. And that's just a reality of this process. Okay, now we have our information, we analyze the facts, now we want to determine cause. Okay, this is more about the why. Why did this happen? What are the contributing factors, eventually root causes, that allowed this to occur? And how do those things relate, right? What are their relationships? You're going to identify those layers that we talked about, that I probably over-talked about, right? Direct cause, contributing causes, and root causes. This image, the domino theory, right? It oversimplifies this relationship. It shows it as a linear relationship. Okay, root cause, contributing factor, direct cause, outcome. Nice and easy, one of each. It's never that simple. The workplace, people, industrial processes, laboratory and research processes are more complicated than that. There's multiple factors at each level that interact. Okay, that's why a tool like this can be really helpful, right? And this is where you may pay attention if you're interested on winning our prize here for the activity, right? We're going to do this causal diagram exercise, but for a different event. So you can't see the text probably, and that's okay. It does the idea to follow along with the illustration. So here we have, let's call it a fictitious event at a fictitious organization where we have an incident, okay? So the intention was for the lab to mix sodium hydroxide with water to act as a neutralizer for waste. The incident was grab sodium hydride and mix that with water. Right? A water reactive compound that led to a reaction. And there's our incident event and a slight release of material that we're interested in, okay? So both our outcome and our direct cause are grouped together in the first box here, and that's the reaction event, okay? Sodium hydride mixed with water. So we ask ourselves, why did that occur? Well, two things have to be true. The relationship happens to be an and relationship. Two things have to be true. The lab wanted to neutralize acid. If they weren't going to do that, this would have never occurred. And we had to grab the wrong chemical by mistake. Remember, they grabbed the sodium hydride instead of sodium hydroxide. Okay, so then we'd ask ourselves, why did the individual grab the wrong chemical by mistake? And we would learn that, a little bit of inexperience related to that. Maybe they would have double-checked if they were a little bit more experienced, looked a bit closer. The compounds were stored in identical-looking desiccators. And of course, they had such similar names, right? Someone could look at a label, they see the first X amount of letters, and it looks the same. All contributing factors, okay? Okay, on the other side, the lab was neutralizing acid. Why were they doing that? Well, it turns out, one, they didn't know that lab neutralization of waste is not allowed or permitted. It's not something that we can do and treat waste. And they didn't have an acid-compatible container. So we can go a bit deeper. Why did they not have an acid-compatible container? Well, three things were true. They didn't ask for them. They didn't know that if they don't have them, the responsibility to obtain the right container relies on them. And they thought that pickup of prior waste collections guaranteed replacement, which it does not. Okay? And then they also didn't know that treatment neutralization was prohibited, right? Why did they not know that? Well, what we might find is that maybe there's unclear information in the policy, and that maybe the training and communication that are provided says nothing about this. How would they ever know that that's not allowed, right? So just some examples here working through this causal diagram. Once we identify cause, the what and the why, now we want to take action, right? Because again, our whole purpose is to prevent reoccurrence of this incident or similar, okay? Corrective action is the first type part of your planning, and corrective actions are typically going to address like unsafe conditions. They're usually immediate, they usually have a short timeline, they're correcting some superficial, discrete, immediate thing, right? That's why they tend to be something physical. Preventative actions are, it's in the name, are more preventative in nature. They tend to address maybe human behavior issues, organizational deficiencies. They tend to be holistic, cross-functional or cross-cutting, systematic. They're going to take more planning and time, okay? Again, kind of just generally nomenclature, but you want to think of both. Corrective action can occur right away. If we have, say, a chemical spill, we might stop the spill of material and then clean up that stuff. That all happens right away as corrective action. But then we want to think about how we're going to prevent that from occurring again in the future. So preventative action is more future-oriented. This is important, another step of the action plan. Once you come up with your corrective actions, maybe some are right away, maybe some you're planning, and preventative actions that will happen down the line, you need to verify that you have the buy-in, okay? We don't want to go around making changes to the lab, the plant, wherever you might work in, right? We want to go around making changes without people's buy-in. To be success for implementation, you're going to have to do that. So some examples may be, maybe you identify preventative action related to establishing a maintenance process for a piece of equipment. Well, I hope you talk with the maintenance manager, right? Maybe you're going to change certain apparatus or equipment in a certain area of the plant. Well, I hope you talk to that plant supervisor, okay? Maybe you are going to recommend changes in employment screening and verification or whatever. I hope you worked with HR, right? And we could apply those same principles. Maybe that's more on the safety management side, but you could apply those same principles of verification in your own lab operations and within your group. And finally, hopefully it's the easy part at this point because you did all the homework. Now you're going to just take action. You're going to implement your corrective and preventative actions, and very importantly, assign to individuals and have a time frame associated with it to drive to completion. Okay. So I'm going to stop talking for a bit after I give you some instructions. I'll have you guys participate. I gave some handouts. Please share those around. Not everyone needs one. This tends to be a group activity. If you wanted it to, you could do it individually, however you like to proceed. But we're going to have you identify contributing factors to an incident. So as you can tell, the cake theme is coming back, right? So we're kind of sponsored here, and we have a bakery that donated some goods for people that want to perform well. It's kind of a fun challenge and a puzzle. Students happen to enjoy this. Yeah, so certified licensed bakery, no worries there. If you have any food allergies, please be cognizant of that. But if you're interested, give it your best go and fill in the puzzle. So we're going to cover a near-miss incident that involves, of course, cake. I will say, if you participated in this activity before, which I know some of you have, you are exempt, but I'll put you in the drawing, okay, for the prize, because that's my thank you for participating in my trainings or classes. So you just know the answers, so don't give them away is all I'm asking, okay? Okay, so here's the info and the facts, right? I'm covering step 1 and 2 of the incident investigation for you. I'm covering the facts, okay? Let's say it's Friday, it's early morning, right? And this is based on a real event. Friday, early morning. I will say too, I picked a simple process or operation that we all can relate to, right? This is a driving scenario. It's not an industrial operation. It's not a high-tech research or anything like that. Something we can all relate to, driving, okay? So Friday at 6:30 a.m., we're getting ready to leave the house. My wife, being the baker that she is, prepares for a cake that's going to be delivered to a customer. And she doesn't know when the customer is going to eat that cake. Are they going to eat it tonight or later? That's going to determine if she puts it in the fridge or not. Believe me, I have to hear about how that's very important for quality and customer assurance, and it is. So we're getting ready to leave. She doesn't know when the customer is going to eat it. She texts that customer at 6:30, hey, you're going to eat this cake tonight or tomorrow? No response. So we get ready to leave the house. I will note that my backup camera didn't work, right? It died that week. I ordered a new one. It did not yet arrive. That will play a role, okay? So we leave our driveway, 7 a.m., we go through our neighborhood, we turn left onto the rural road to get to the highway, and at that time, she gets a text, right? We're driving on that rural road, and she gets a text, and it says, oh, we're gonna eat the cake tomorrow. After a short debate, we do what lots of married couples do, we decide to turn around and head back to the house, right? We've all been there, right? You've all had that point where you're like, okay, first driveway I see, I'm gonna turn around, right? So that's what happened. All right, so now we have some illustrations. Here I am on that road, 2-lane road, traffic one way, traffic the other way. I'm gonna pull in the first driveway I see. We've all been there. Here I am in the driveway. Okay, I'm in not my driveway. I'm in this random person's driveway and I'm getting ready to turn around. Okay, I have a mailbox adjacent to me. That's going to impact the path I take, right? I can't turn this too wide, right? I can't cut my wheel too sharp. I can't hit this mailbox. There's traffic going both ways. It's rush hour in the morning, fairly busy. There's a blind hill here, so I can barely see traffic until they're close to me, right? Not a good position to be in, but I identify those hazards, I manage it best I can, and I get ready to back out. So I back out, and here I am, nearly striking this mailbox. Okay, so there's our incident. What type of incident? Near miss. I nearly missed it, right? Darn, not even by an inch, by the way. It was like amazing. It was one of those memes where it's like I'm this close to losing it, and it was like a hair, right? So close. So, all right, here's where I will turn it over to you. You have the information. You're going to fill in this causal diagram. You all have handouts, or not, maybe not all of you. Like I said, work in groups, as many as you want, or by yourself, whatever. You're going to fill in the causal diagram. The goal is to understand why this happened. So, okay, make sure you keep track of how many you got right, whether you did it as an individual or a group. Keep track of how many you got right. If you're interested, our top performers will be put into a drawing to win the door prize. This is a rich chocolate cake with, what is it called? Cookie butter icing, like Biscoff. It's kind of light, not so sweet, a great combination. If you're interested, if you can consume this type of baked good, you're welcome to put your name in for the drawing. Like I said, if I had you in class before, you were exempt from the activity, you knew all the answers, you can go ahead and put your name in the drawing as well. So get ready to find a little piece of paper or something to put your name in. We'll put it in the hat, and we'll put the name out of the hat. But you're still in the running if you did well as a group or an individual, okay? By the way, this is supposed to be hard. Your brain might not work like mine does. You can have the same causal diagram for this same incident, I should say, and it might result in different looking causal diagrams. Sometimes there can be two versions that look kind of the same but different and still reveal the same basic contributing causes and action plan. Okay, so here's the answer. I want you to tally how many you got right as an individual or group, however you're putting in for your drawing. Okay, so let me go over it. I'll say it out loud. You guys just count out of 21, right? All right, so almost backed into the mailbox. Oh, I want to say too, you might be thinking, who cares? It's just a mailbox. And who cares? You didn't even hit it, right? But this is the nature of the near miss process and why we want to investigate all incidents. One, I would say to that, well, what if it wasn't a mailbox, right? What if it was a pedestrian, a cyclist, a person, right? A student standing at the bus stop. That could be the case. And then, of course, what if I did hit it? It was a matter of inches, less than an inch, right? And I nearly struck that object. So for all these reasons, we investigate. We can learn things about our organization, the gaps, where we can improve to prevent similar or adjacent incidents, okay? So why did I almost back into it? Well, I decided to turn around. I had to choose that exact location near the mailbox, that exact driveway. I didn't see the mailbox, and I chose that, or I was forced to take that specific backing path with my vehicle. Okay, all those things had to be true. If any one of those things were different, this wouldn't have happened. All those things are true. Okay, why did I decide to turn around? Well, we got information about when the cake was due after we left the house. That's why we decided to turn around. That specific backing location, why did I choose that driveway? Well, I felt kind of pressured and rushed, just my own thing, right? I individually felt like I wanted to choose the first driveway possible, okay? And I just chose the first one possible. I really didn't do a risk assessment ahead of time, right? I didn't think proactively to say, well, maybe not this one. Maybe I'll wait for one that's not by a blind hill. I just chose the first one, okay? I didn't see the mailbox. Why? The natural configuration of the road, the crown, the shape of it, okay? Natural vehicle blind spots, pillars in the vehicle and such. I didn't have my backup camera. If I could see clearly the full field of view behind me, I could have been able to see it. And I was distracted kind of by other hazards that could play a role. It could contribute to the scenario. So let's go a bit deeper on the backup camera. Why did I not have a backup camera for this exact circumstance? Well, one, it failed. I told you that. Two, chose to drive without one, right? That had to be true. And also, I didn't receive the new one I ordered quite yet and install it. So all that had to be true. And then why did the equipment fail? We could dive a bit deeper there. We could explore maybe it's a bad fuse, maybe I don't have source power, maybe it's the power circuit or just the communication circuit. I have these crossed out because it was indeed by voltage test, the communication conductor, and I just ordered a new one. It failed, okay? And then my specific backing path that the vehicle followed, right? Maybe because of contributing factors of cross traffic, the blind hill contributing my path that I chose, and that mailbox that was directly adjacent to me in my original driveway, right? It kind of guided me on what specific path my vehicle took to be nearly next to the new mailbox. Okay, so 21 boxes total. Anyone get them all right? Yeah, that would be part of the plan. Good. I wouldn't expect you to. Or I'd be like, would you have a bug in my brain? Like, how do you know? That's okay. Anyone get them almost all right? Like 18, 19, 17? You did count them up, right? 16, 16, 16? No, 15, 15. Anyone else get 15? Okay, keep your hands up if you have 15. How many people? Your whole group, how many people total? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 total people? Okay. Anyone else? 15. Okay. So if you got 15, you guys over there, put your name down. If you're interested in the raffle, right, there's going to be 3 winners, okay? So put your name down if you're interested in the raffle. If you got 15, I saw about how many people you are. And again, if you were a prior student that was exempt from that activity, thank you, put your name in the raffle, and that's how we'll pick the winner. So I'll start it over here. It's got to make its way over to these guys too. Who are the 15ers? Yeah. Name. That's all I need. To let you guys pass it around to anyone that needs it. Okay. So if you guys continue to talk about it, I know it was kind of fun. It got you thinking, or maybe debate. Maybe yours would have looked different than mine. That's okay. Okay. All right, guys, I'm going to finish off for you. Okay. I'm going to finish off for you, and then you'll be free to go, and we'll have some winners that go home with something delicious. So thank you. We're going to talk about what factors can we influence from all of these causes, right? What can we, as an organization, now we're shifting to a hypothetical occupational organizational setting, right? Not just my own experience. What can we influence of all those causes on that diagram? Well, one, we could maybe influence some human factors, right? These are people that are at work. We have some obligation to set them up for success. So we could influence some of these factors about feeling crushed and pressured, a lack of risk assessment, narrow focus on other hazards, things like that. We do have some influence in the organization on human factors. Not a lot. People are their own person, but we do have some influence. We'll talk about it. Driving without a backup camera. Now, that's an unsafe act that occurred, but the organization is obligated to provide the mechanisms to prevent that from happening. So we'll talk about that. And the timing, this is definitely organizational control, right? Imagine a cake delivery service, an occupation, an organization, right? They can control when they receive that timing. Because remember, very early on in the chart, if we would have known when the cake was going to be consumed, if we would have known that before we left our driveway, none of this would have ever happened. We would have never turned around. So that's definitely a process organizationally that we can control. Yes, there are some things we can't control. I can't control how the public road is constructed and the shape of it and where people put their mailboxes, things like that. So that's fair to identify. All right, let's skip a bit. Wait, our graph diagram consisted of contributing factors, maybe some root causes in there, but let's boil it down to our 3 dominant root causes that we can talk about, at least for this session. And that is the lack of standardized ordering procedure, right? I talked about if we would have had information ahead of time, how things would be different. No mechanism to prevent employees from operating compromised vehicles, like a broken backup camera, and then a lack of a driver safety program and training that points out human factors related to safe driving decisions. That's what we might think about. So remember our first 3 steps, we got information, we analyzed the facts, we came up with the causes, why it happened, and now we're developing our action plan. So based on our root causes and some contributing factors sprinkled in, we have the lack of that standardized ordering process, right? That was a big one. right? If we would have got information on time, this would have never happened. So what could we do? Well, our organization could establish a standardized ordering process, aka an order form, and a field of that order form during the ordering process could have customers specify and maybe employees verify when a customer is consuming a cake. That information could be strategically passed to delivery drivers, and now we have this flow of information established by the organization. Okay, operating a compromised vehicle system, right? No backup camera. That's the unsafe act, but we're not worried and focusing on the act and behavior of the person. Yes, that was a contributing factor. Could they have made a different decision, used a different vehicle? Yes, they could have, but they didn't. But that's not the person's fault. Remember that from the beginning? That's not their fault. The organization needs to have a mechanism in place that prevents them from doing that, right? So some organizational mechanisms we talk about is a policy overall that prevents this type of thing, right? Some rear operation protocol where, okay, if you don't have a backup camera, we're going to train you and require you to get out of your vehicle and physically assess the environment. That's pretty common. That's pretty common in fleet operations settings. Some corrective maintenance process. I don't know if this fictitious organization would have this, right? But what happens when an employee identifies a deficiency? Or even, I'll back up further, is there a process for them to identify deficiencies? Are people supposed to do a pre-use inspection of a vehicle before they go and do a delivery? Are they checking key safety systems and turn signals and lights, or for leaks or for tire pressure, right? Maybe we should do that. And then if they find something, what are they doing with that information? Are they providing it to a fleet maintenance group, taking it to the garage, tagging a vehicle on the steering wheel, say out of service? Okay. Okay. And then we're maybe, and this is kind of higher level, more expensive in engineering control, really, but really good. But a good option to explore too is, what is the status of our fictitious organization's fleet vehicles, right? Do they implement maybe more modern vehicles with active safety systems that have rear object detection, right? So maybe even if the backup camera goes out, you get some warning, some auditory warning perhaps, or maybe even automatic emergency braking based on object detection and potential collision. That's a pretty high level, good control. And we have some work processes in there too. And then finally, a lot of the contributing factors were just about human, right? I call them human factors, the things that lead to people's behavior. Well, how can we influence that? People are people, right? Well, the organization at least can try, right? And there's ways we can influence it. So we could have a driver safety program. We could have training as part of a driver safety program that highlights the importance of these human factors conditions. You know, to recognize and aware of when you're feeling rushed, to exercise risk assessment during decision points and identify hazards of traffic and make different decisions. Just that culture of established processes is important. And then just finally, just communicating this incident to other employees, right? If you have a fleet of delivery drivers, for example, for our organization, do they even know that this happened? What did we learn from it, right? What did we change in the organization because of it? So the simple communication and awareness of incidents themselves can be a preventative action and help people's minds get right, and influence behavior. And that all leads to culture. All of this really leads to culture, but that's our basic example. The one thing I wanted to say, hopefully I didn't say it already, and I'm repeating myself, but you might have noticed, right? Did that diagram seem pretty convoluted and overcomplicated for you almost hit a mailbox, right? And that's for a reason, right? Even a simple event like you almost hit a mailbox in driving, and we all know what driving is, even that had that diagram that was fairly complex, right? So imagine large industrial environments where you have 100 different valves and many different hazards, and it spans a football field, or just complex lab operations where you have a variety of hazards. And not only in all these workplace scenarios or lab and learning scenarios, you have many people involved. And that can be sometimes what makes it complicated, right? Different people have relationships. This causes behavior. There's organizational structures and relationships about the organization and opinions, right? So sometimes people say, oh, well, safety is common sense, and this happened because of that. And hopefully this let it be inspired that it's kind of more complicated than it is on the surface, right? That's the whole idea. Contributing causes, some stuff that's obvious might be pretty superficial. We want to get to organizational problems and fix those problems, and that's why we call them root causes, because they're underneath the surface. Okay. So I hope that was fun. Do we have the drawing? Okay, cool. Pass it over. All right, so before I pick guys, I'm just going to end by saying, thank you very much. I had a blast. I like talking about this stuff. Hope you learned something. Again, you can apply it. Hopefully, you're never part of an incident, right? But if you are, you'll feel empowered to participate. When you go into industry where it can be large and complicated and events can occur, you'll be more educated when you go there as well. So I hope you found it interesting. Thank you very much. I'm going to stop this recording and I'll pick our winner. So thank you very much, guys.